"You missed a spot, Janitor." The voice cuts through the empty hallway like a blade. Elena Morwenna looks up to find Cassandra Nighthollow, one of the vampire court's personal assistants, standing with her arms crossed. Her crimson lips curl into something that might be a smile on someone kinder. "I'm getting to it," Elena says quietly, dipping her mop back into the bucket. "You've been getting to it for 3 months now. Honestly, I don't know why King Theron keeps human staff around. You're slow, you're inefficient, and you smell like—" "Is there something you need, Cassandra?" Elena interrupts, her voice steady, despite the heat crawling up her neck. She's heard worse. After her husband died 2 years ago, leaving her with nothing but debt and whispers, she's learned to let cruelty slide off her like water off these floors. Cassandra's eyes narrow. "Actually, yes. The king needs someone to clean his grandmother's chambers. The private ones. You know, where she died last week." Elena's stomach tightens. Everyone in the palace knows about Dowager Queen Seraphine's death. The entire vampire kingdom has been in mourning, black banners hanging from every tower. She was ancient, even by vampire standards, and beloved. Her funeral drew dignitaries from every supernatural court in the world. "Before we continue, please prove my mom wrong. She says I can't hit 1,000 subscribers." "Okay, let's continue." "I thought those chambers were sealed," Elena says. "They were, until an hour ago." Cassandra examines her nails, each one filed to a perfect point. The king has been holed up in there all night, trying to read his grandmother's final letter. Apparently, she wrote it in some archaic dialect that none of our scholars can translate. Not even Lord Ambrose, and he's 800 years old. She laughs, the sound sharp and brittle. "So, the king is in quite a mood. You'll want to be invisible. Quieter than usual, if that's possible." Elena nods, already wringing out her mop. Her heart hammers as she follows Cassandra through the winding corridors of the palace, past tapestries that probably cost more than her entire life, past windows that overlook gardens she's never been allowed to walk through. They stop at a door carved from black wood, silver inlaid in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Cassandra knocks twice, then steps back. "Enter." The voice from inside is deep, rough with exhaustion or grief or both. Cassandra opens the door but doesn't go in. Instead, she gestures for Elena to proceed, that cruel smile back on her face. "Try not to embarrass yourself," she whispers. The chamber is vast, all dark wood and darker shadows. Candles burn in silver holders, casting dancing light across walls lined with books. And in the center of it all, sitting at a desk covered in papers, is King Theron Ashenmore. Elena has seen him before, of course, from a distance, during ceremonies and formal dinners where she worked in the background, invisible in her gray uniform. But she's never been this close. Close enough to see the exhaustion carved into his face, the way his usually perfect black hair falls across his forehead, disheveled. His white shirt is unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with old scars. He looks less like a king and more like a man who hasn't slept in days. He doesn't look up when she enters. His attention is fixed on a single piece of paper, yellowed with age, covered in spidery handwriting. "Put the cleaning supplies in the corner," he says, his voice distant. "I'll tell you when you can start." Elena does as she's told, moving as quietly as possible. She sets down her bucket, her rags, her bottles of solution, and then she waits, hands folded in front of her, trying not to stare at the king of the vampire realm as he runs his hands through his hair in frustration. "I can't," he cuts himself off, jaw clenching. 300 years old, and I can't read my own grandmother's final words. She raised me. She taught me everything, and I can't even... He slams his hand down on the desk, and Elena flinches. But he still doesn't look at her. She wonders if he even remembers she's there. The paper sits between them, so close she can almost see the writing from where she stands. And that's when Elena's breath catches in her throat. Because she recognizes those letters. The strange, curling script that none of the ancient vampire scholars could read. She's seen it before. Her grandmother used to write like that. Her human grandmother, who raised her in a small village hours from the capital, who taught her old folk songs and older stories, who spoke a dialect so ancient that even the other villagers called it outdated, useless. Elena hasn't thought about those lessons in years, hasn't had reason to. Those memories belong to a different life, before marriage, before debt, before she became invisible. Your Majesty, she hears herself say. Theron's head snaps up, and for the first time he truly sees her. His eyes are silver, almost white in the candlelight, and they cut through her with an intensity that makes her want to step back. But she holds her ground. "What?" he asks, and there's a warning in his tone. "Don't waste my time." Elena's mouth goes dry. This is stupid. Dangerous. She should go back to her corner. Should stay invisible like Cassandra said. But the pain in his expression, the raw grief barely held together, makes her brave. "I think I might be able to read it," she says. "The letter. I might be able to translate it." For a long moment, Theron just stares at her. Then he laughs, but there's no humor in it. "You? A janitor? When scholars who've lived for centuries can't decipher a single word?" The dismissal in his voice stings, but Elena expected it. She's used to being underestimated, overlooked. "It's written in Old Corvinian," she says quietly, "a human dialect from the northern mountain regions. My grandmother spoke it, taught it to me when I was young. It's mostly dead now, but—" "Come here," Theron's command cuts through her explanation. He gestures to the desk, to the paper that's been tormenting him. "If you're lying, if this is some kind of game, I'm not." Elena crosses the room, her heart pounding so hard, she's sure he can hear it. Vampires can sense things like that, fear and arousal, and everything in between. She stops beside the desk, close enough to smell him now, cedar and something darker, something ancient. He slides the paper toward her, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. The touch is cold, electric. Elena forces herself to focus on the writing, on the carefully formed letters that swim before her eyes. She reads the first line silently, and her throat tightens. "Out loud," Theron says, his voice softer now, but no less intense. "Please." Elena takes a breath and begins. "My dearest Theron, if you are reading this, then I have finally joined your grandfather in the eternal darkness. Do not mourn me too deeply, beloved boy. I have lived 3,000 years, and most of them were spent watching you grow into the man, the king, I always knew you would become." Her voice wavers on the last word, but she continues. The letter is beautiful, achingly personal. Seraphine writes about Theron's childhood, about the night she found him after his parents were killed in a coup, about raising him in secret until he was strong enough to reclaim his throne. She writes about her pride in him, her love, her certainty that he will lead their people into a new age. And then, near the end, the tone shifts. "I know you have been lonely, my dear one," Elena reads, her voice barely above a whisper now. "I know you believe that a king must stand alone, must sacrifice happiness for duty. But I am old enough to have learned this truth. Strength is not found in isolation. The greatest rulers are those who allow themselves to be loved, to be vulnerable, to be human in their hearts, even if not in their blood." Elena's hands shake as she reads the final lines. Do not marry for alliance. Do not choose a partner because she is powerful, or connected, or expected. Choose someone who sees you, Theron. Not the crown, not the legend, you. And when you find her, do not let her go. Not for duty, not for tradition, not for the court's approval. Love, my darling boy, is the only magic stronger than death. I hope you find it before you become as old and foolish as I am. With all my eternal affection, your grandmother, Seraphine. The silence that follows is deafening. Elena can't bring herself to look at Theron, can't bear to see his reaction to such intimate words. She sets the paper down carefully, reverently, and starts to step back. Wait! His hand catches her wrist, gentle but firm. Don't go. She freezes. His thumb rests against her pulse point, and she knows he can feel how fast her heart is racing. How did you... He stops, starts again. How does a janitor know Old Corvinian? Elena swallows. My grandmother. She was from a village in the north before the Consolidation Wars. Most of her family spoke it. She taught me because she didn't want the language to die completely. I didn't realize it would be useful. I didn't realize anyone else even remembered it existed. Theron's grip on her wrist loosens, but he doesn't let go. His eyes search her face like he's seeing her for the first time, really seeing her. What's your name? Elena. Elena Morwenna. Elena. He says it slowly, carefully, like he's tasting each syllable. How long have you worked here? 3 months, Your Majesty. And before that? She hesitates. Her past isn't something she discusses, especially not with the king of the vampire realm while he's holding her wrist in a darkened chamber. But something about the grief still lingering in his eyes, about the vulnerability in his grandmother's letter, makes her honest. I was married, she says quietly. My husband died 2 years ago. He left debts, significant ones. I've been trying to pay them off ever since. This job, it's more than I could make anywhere else. I need it. Theron's expression shifts, something softening around his eyes. You're human. It's not a question, but she answers anyway. Yes. And you read my grandmother's final letter. Words she wrote in a language she knew I wouldn't understand, that none of my court would understand. His thumb moves against her wrist, a small, unconscious gesture that sends heat through her entire body. Why would she do that? Elena thinks about the letter, about Seraphine's words, about love and vulnerability and choosing someone who sees you. And she thinks about the way Theron is looking at her right now, like she's suddenly become the most important person in the room. Maybe, Elena says carefully. She wanted to make sure the right person translated it. The corner of Theron's mouth lifts, almost a smile. The right person. A janitor who knows a dead language. A widow who was taught by her grandmother, Elena corrects gently. There's a difference. This time, he does smile, and it transforms his face. He looks younger, less burdened, almost human. There is indeed. He releases her wrist, and Elena immediately misses the cold touch of his skin against hers. She steps back, remembering herself, remembering the distance that's supposed to exist between a king and a servant. Thank you, Theron says, and the sincerity in his voice catches her off guard. For translating, for giving me her words. He looks down at the letter, his jaw working. I needed this. I'm glad I could help. Your Majesty? Theron. He looks up at her. When we're alone, call me Theron. Elena's breath stutters. I don't think that would be appropriate. Probably not. His eyes hold hers. Do it anyway. There's a knock at the door before she can respond, sharp and insistent. Theron's expression closes off immediately, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of a king. Enter, he calls out. Cassandra sweeps in, her gaze immediately finding Elena with obvious disapproval. Your Majesty, Lord Ambrose requests an audience. He says it's urgent, regarding the translation. She stops, noticing the letter on the desk, the way Theron is standing close to Elena. Did the janitor actually manage to clean something? Elena translated my grandmother's letter, Theron says, his voice cool and formal. She reads Old Corvinian. Cassandra's perfectly shaped eyebrows rise. How convenient, and unexpected, almost suspicious, one might say. The implication is clear, and Elena feels heat flood her cheeks. But before she can defend herself, Theron steps between them, his body a wall of protection. Are you questioning my judgment, Cassandra? The temperature in the room drops several degrees. Cassandra immediately lowers her eyes, her confidence evaporating. Of course not, Your Majesty. I simply meant you meant to insult someone who just provided me with an invaluable service. Someone who succeeded where every scholar in my court failed. Theron's voice is dangerously quiet. I suggest you reconsider your tone. Cassandra's face goes pale. She curtsies quickly, her composure cracking. My apologies, Your Majesty. I spoke out of turn. You did. Theron doesn't move, doesn't soften. Tell Lord Ambrose I'll meet with him in an hour. And Cassandra? Elena reports directly to me now. If anyone questions her presence in the palace, in any location, they answer to me personally. Is that clear? Elena's heart stops. Reports directly to him? What does that even mean? Perfectly clear, Your Majesty. Cassandra curtsies again, shoots Elena a look of pure venom, and retreats from the chamber. The silence that follows is heavy with implications. Elena should thank him, should acknowledge his protection. But all she can think about is the way he said her name, the way he stood between her and Cassandra, without hesitation. You didn't have to do that, she says finally. Defend me. I'm used to people like her. Theron turns back to face her, and the intensity in his eyes steals her breath. Maybe you shouldn't have to be. He crosses to his desk, picks up the letter with careful reverence, and folds it. Then he opens a drawer and pulls out a small leather journal, blank pages waiting to be filled. Can you write in Old Corvinian as well? He asks. Yes. Good. He holds out the journal. My grandmother left other papers, other writings. Some in languages I recognize, but others... He gestures to a wooden box on the shelf behind him. I want them all translated, properly, by someone I can trust. Elena takes the journal, her fingers brushing his again. That same electric cold. You don't know if you can trust me. No, he agrees, but my grandmother did, and that's enough. The weight of that statement settles between them. Elena looks down at the journal, at the expensive leather, the empty pages. This is more than a job. This is access to the most private parts of the Dowager Queen's life, to family secrets and royal history. This is Theron telling her that he's willing to take a risk on a janitor who translated one letter. I'll need time, she says, to do it properly, and space to work. The servants' quarters are, You'll work here, Theron interrupts. In this chamber. My grandmother's study is connected through that door. He points to a panel in the wall Elena hadn't noticed. You will have complete privacy. No one will disturb you. But my other duties are reassigned as of now. He's not asking. He's deciding. This is your only responsibility. Translating my grandmother's papers. Elena should argue, should point out that this is irregular, that it will cause talk, that people like Cassandra will make her life difficult. But looking at Theron's face, at the hope and grief and something else she doesn't dare name, she finds herself nodding. Okay, she whispers. I'll do it. His smile is small but genuine, and it does dangerous things to her heart. Thank you, Elena. The way he says her name, like it matters, like she matters, makes her forget for a moment that she's just a widow with debts and a mop. Makes her forget that he's a 300-year-old vampire king who could have anyone, who should have someone powerful and connected and appropriate. But then, she remembers Seraphine's words. Choose someone who sees you, not the crown, not the legend. You. And Elena realizes, with a flutter of terror and hope, that Theron is looking at her like she might be exactly that someone. The next 3 weeks pass in a blur of old papers and careful translations. Elena moves into the Dowager Queen's study, a beautiful room filled with books and comfortable chairs and windows that overlook the rose garden. It's the nicest space she's ever occupied, and at first she's afraid to touch anything, afraid she'll break something priceless or leave fingerprints where they don't belong. But gradually the room becomes hers. She makes tea in the small kitchen attached to the study, She opens windows to let in fresh air. She even rearranges some of the books, organizing them by language and date to make her translations easier. And every evening, Theron comes to check on her progress. At first, his visits are brief and formal. He reads what she's translated, nods his approval, and leaves. But slowly, the visits grow longer. He starts asking questions about the translation process, about old Corvinian grammar and idioms. Then he starts asking about her grandmother, about her childhood in the northern village. Elena finds herself telling him stories she hasn't thought about in years, about learning to read by candlelight, about her grandmother's garden where she grew herbs for healing and cooking, about the old songs they would sing together on winter nights. And Theron listens. Actually listens, his attention complete and unwavering. He remembers details from previous conversations, asks follow-up questions, laughs at her funny stories, and looks sad at the painful ones. One evening, 3 weeks after she started translating, Elena looks up from a particularly difficult passage to find Theron standing at the window, staring out at the gardens with an expression she can't quite read. "Is something wrong?" she asks, setting down her pen. He's quiet for a long moment. Then he says, "Tell me about your husband." The question catches her off guard. They've talked about many things, but never this. Why? "Because I want to know, because you mentioned debts and pain, but never joy. And I wonder if there was any. Joy, I mean." Elena sets down the paper she was working on and joins him at the window. Outside, the roses are in full bloom, red and white and deep purple. There was at first. Garrett was charming, attentive. He made me feel special, chosen. We married quickly, maybe too quickly, and for a few months it was good. And then I realized the charm was surface deep. He liked the idea of me, the way I looked on his arm at parties, the way other men envied him. But he didn't like me, the real me. When I talked about books or ideas or things I cared about, he would smile and nod and change the subject. When I suggested we save money instead of spending it on appearances, he called me provincial and boring. She wraps her arms around herself, remembering. When he died, I was sad. But I was also relieved, and that made me feel horrible. What kind of person feels relieved when their husband dies? "A person who was lonely in her own marriage," Theron says quietly. "A person who was seen as an object instead of a soul." Elena looks at him, startled by his understanding. "Yes, exactly that." Theron turns to face her fully, and in the fading light, his eyes look almost human. "My grandmother's letter said I should find someone who sees me, not the crown, not the legend, just me." He reaches out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucks a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think you see me, Elena Morwenna, and I think I'm starting to see you." Her breath catches. His hand lingers near her face, cold fingers against warm skin. "Theron, we can't." "Why not?" "Because you're a king. Because I'm human and mortal and completely inappropriate. Because your court would never accept me. Because you're afraid," he interrupts gently. "The way I've been afraid. Afraid to want something beyond duty and expectation." He's right. She is afraid. Terrified, actually. Of wanting something she can't have. Of hoping for a future that doesn't exist for people like her. But then she remembers Seraphine's words. Love is the only magic stronger than death. "What if I'm not enough?" Elena whispers. "What if the reality doesn't match what you think you see?" Theron's smile is soft, achingly tender. "Then we'll deal with reality together. But I'd like the chance to find out. Wouldn't you?" Before Elena can answer, the study door slams open. Cassandra stands in the doorway, her face flushed with triumph and anger. "I knew it," she hisses. "I knew there was something inappropriate happening up here. The king, alone with a human servant, in private chambers every night. It's scandalous." Behind her, Elena can see other court members gathering, drawn by the commotion. Lord Ambrose, the ancient scholar. Lady Vesper, one of the noble vampires who advises the council. Several others Elena doesn't recognize. Theron's entire demeanor shifts. The tender man from a moment ago vanishes, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "You dare to enter my grandmother's private study without permission." Cassandra falters but holds her ground. "I dare to protect the reputation of this court, Your Majesty. The servants are talking. They say you spend hours up here every night with the janitor, that you've given her access to the late Queen's private papers, that you've been seen standing too close, touching—" "Enough!" Theron's voice could freeze fire. He steps forward, positioning himself between Elena and Cassandra, just like he did that first night. "What I do in my private time is not your concern." "It is when it affects the kingdom," Lord Ambrose says, stepping forward. His voice is less hostile than Cassandra's, but no less firm. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, you have been neglecting court functions. The council needs to discuss trade agreements, border disputes, succession—" "Succession?" Theron's laugh is bitter. "We're finally getting to the heart of it. You want me to choose a vampire bride, someone approved by the council, someone with the right bloodline and connections. Someone appropriate," Lady Vesper says quietly. "Your grandmother would have wanted—" "My grandmother," Theron interrupts, his voice rising, "wanted me to choose happiness over duty. She said so in her final letter. Words that none of you could read. Words that Elena translated." He gestures to the papers on the desk. "For 3 weeks, Elena has been working on my grandmother's private writings. And do you know what she's found? Journals, memories, including a detailed account of my grandmother's own love story. This gets their attention." Elena watches as the court members exchange glances, curiosity overriding their disapproval. Theron crosses to the desk and picks up one of the translations Elena completed last week. "My grandmother, Dowager Queen Seraphine, fell in love with my grandfather when she was already an established ruler. He was human, a scholar from a poor family, a man with no title and no connections. The court rejected him. They called their relationship inappropriate, scandalous. Sound familiar?" He looks at each of them in turn. "But my grandmother married him anyway. She had him turned, made him her consort, and they ruled together for 800 years. 800 years of happiness and partnership and strength. And when he died, she never remarried, even though the court pressured her constantly, because she had found what mattered most. Not alliance, not bloodline. Love." Elena's hands shake as she realizes what he's doing. He's defending her, defending them, in front of the entire inner court. He's making their relationship public, before it's even fully begun. "That's a lovely story, Your Majesty," Cassandra says, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But it doesn't change the fact that this human is a servant, a janitor. She has no education, no breeding, nothing to offer the kingdom." "She has everything to offer," Theron says quietly, and the conviction in his voice makes Elena's eyes burn with unshed tears. "She's brilliant. She reads and writes 5 languages, including ones that none of your expensive scholars could translate. She's kind. She's honest. And she sees me, truly sees me, in a way none of your appropriate candidates ever have." He turns to Elena then, holds out his hand. "Come here." Elena's heart hammers as every eye in the room fixes on her. This is it. The moment where she becomes visible, where she stops being invisible staff and becomes something else entirely. Something that will make her a target, that will change her life forever. But Theron's hand is steady, and his eyes hold a promise. "Trust me." Elena takes his hand. The cold of his skin against hers feels right now familiar. He draws her close, not inappropriately, but close enough that everyone can see the connection between them. "Elena Morwenna," Theron says, his voice carrying through the chamber, "has served this palace with dignity and skill. She has given me an invaluable gift, allowing me to know my grandmother's final thoughts. her deepest wishes, and in the process, she has become important to me. Very important. Your Majesty, Lord Ambrose says carefully, we understand attraction, but surely you realize that making a human your companion would be complicated. The turning process is not guaranteed to work. She could die, and even if she survives, she will need decades to learn vampire customs, to gain the strength and skills necessary to stand beside a king. Then we'll take those decades, Theron says simply. I'm immortal. I have time. Lady Vesper steps forward, her ancient face troubled. And if the council refuses to accept her, if we insist on a more appropriate match, the temperature in the room drops dramatically. Ice crystals form on the windows. When Theron speaks, his voice is deadly soft. Then I will remind the council that I am not asking for permission. I am 300 years old. I have led this kingdom through wars and plagues and political upheaval. I have sacrificed every personal desire for duty and tradition. And now I am choosing to follow my grandmother's final advice. I am choosing happiness. I am choosing Elena. He looks at each court member in turn. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge my decision formally. But know this, I will not back down. I will not be bullied or manipulated. Elena stays, with my protection, with my favor, and with my intention to court her properly, if she'll have me. The silence that follows is absolute. Elena can feel Cassandra's hatred, Lady Vesper's concern, Lord Ambrose's resignation. But she can also feel Theron's hand in hers, steady and sure. Elena, Theron says, turning to her, his voice softer now, private despite the audience. I know this is sudden. I know I'm putting you in an impossible position. If you want to refuse, if you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll still ensure your debts are paid, that you have everything you need. But if you're willing to try, if you're willing to let me court you properly, to see where this might lead— Yes, Elena interrupts, her voice stronger than she expected. Yes, I'm willing. His smile is pure joy, unguarded and beautiful. He raises her hand to his lips and kisses it gently, his cold lips pressing against her warm skin. It's chaste, appropriate for the audience, but the promise in his eyes is anything but. Then we have an understanding, he says to the court, not looking away from her. Elena is under my personal protection. She will continue her work translating my grandmother's papers, and she will be treated with the respect and courtesy due to someone I am courting. Anyone who fails to do so will answer directly to me. Lord Ambrose sighs, but nods. As you wish, Your Majesty. We will inform the rest of the council. Do that. Theron finally releases Elena's hand, though his fingers linger for a moment. Now, I believe you all have duties to attend to. This is a private chamber. Leave. They file out slowly, Cassandra casting one last poisonous look over her shoulder. When the door finally closes, Elena's knees nearly give out. Theron catches her, his hands on her arms, supporting her. Are you all right? He asks, concern evident in his voice. You just announced to your entire inner court that you intend to court me, Elena says, her voice shaking. You stood up to them. For me, a janitor with debts and no family, and nothing to offer. You have everything to offer, Theron repeats. Don't you understand that yet? He cups her face in his hands, and Elena lets herself lean into his touch. They're going to make this difficult, she whispers. For both of us. Let them try. His thumb brushes her cheek. I've faced down enemy armies and assassins and political coups. I can handle a few disapproving court members. Elena laughs, though it comes out watery. You're insane. You know that, right? Probably. His smile is crooked, boyish. Is that going to be a problem? Definitely. But she's smiling too, and when he leans down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, she doesn't. His lips meet hers, cold and soft and perfect. The kiss is gentle, careful, like he's afraid she'll break. But Elena isn't breakable. She's survived loss and debt, and invisibility. She's strong enough for this, for him, for whatever comes next. When they finally pull apart, Theron rests his forehead against hers. I meant what I said. About courting you properly. Dinners, conversations, time to actually know each other. I won't rush you into anything. Even though your court is going to demand answers. Especially because of that. He pulls back enough to look at her properly. This is about us, Elena. Not them. Not politics or appearances. Us. And looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability and hope there, Elena believes him. This vampire king who could have anyone. Who should choose someone appropriate and powerful and connected, has chosen her. A widow with a dead language and a good heart. Okay, she says. Let's try this. Together. His answering smile could light up the darkest night. And as he pulls her close, as she rests her head against his chest and listens to the slow, steady beat of his ancient heart, Elena thinks about Seraphine's words. Love is the only magic stronger than death. Maybe the Dowager Queen knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote that letter in Old Corvinian. Maybe she knew that the right person would find it, would translate it, would help her grandson remember that duty, and love don't have to be enemies. Outside the window, the sun sets over the vampire kingdom. And in the gathering darkness, Elena Morwenna, former janitor and current translator of royal secrets, lets herself hope for a future she never imagined possible. A future where she's not invisible. A future where she's chosen. A future where she's loved. The palace gardens bloom with night-flowering jasmine when Theron takes Elena on their first official date 3 nights later. He's arranged for a private dinner in the rose garden, under strings of lights that make the space feel magical. Elena wears a dress he had made for her, deep green silk that makes her feel like someone else, someone who belongs in fairy tales and royal courts. You look beautiful, Theron says when he sees her, and the way he says it, like he's stating an undeniable fact, makes her blush. You clean up well yourself, she teases, taking in his perfectly tailored suit, his hair swept back. The way he looks every inch the vampire king. But when he smiles at her joke, when he offers his arm and leads her through the garden like she's precious, she sees the man underneath the crown. The man who reads his grandmother's journals and grieves her loss. The man who gets frustrated with courtiers and protective of people he cares about. The man who makes her feel seen. Dinner is perfect. They talk about everything and nothing. He tells her stories about his grandmother, about growing up as a vampire prince, about the weight of responsibility. She tells him about her dreams of traveling, of seeing the world beyond her small village and the capital city, of maybe writing down some of the old stories her grandmother taught her. You should, Theron says immediately. Write them down. Preserve them. Languages and stories. They're treasures. And you have a gift for both. A gift, Elena repeats, laughing softly. 3 months ago I was scrubbing floors. And now you're dining with a king who would rather be here with you than anywhere else. He reaches across the table, takes her hand. Do you regret it? The visibility? The complication? Elena considers the question seriously. Since that night in the study, things have changed. Servants whisper when she walks by. Cassandra has made several more attempts to undermine her, though Theron shuts them down immediately. The court watches her constantly, waiting for her to fail, to prove she's unworthy. But she also has this, Theron's hand in hers. Evening conversations that stretch late into the night. The way he looks at her like she's the most fascinating person in any room. No, she says honestly. I don't regret it. It's hard, but it's real. And I'll take difficult and real over easy and hollow any day. Even when Cassandra accidentally spills wine on you? Or when Lady Vesper asks pointed questions about your family lineage? Elena grins, especially then. Because I know I'm here on my own merit. Because you chose me knowing exactly who I am, a woman with debts and a dead language, and a past that includes scrubbing floors. And you chose me anyway. Theron's expression goes soft, tender. Elena, I didn't choose you anyway. I chose you because of who you are. All of it. The strength that kept you going after your husband died. The humility that let you take work others would consider beneath them. The brilliance that saw patterns in old writing that ancient scholars missed. The kindness that translated not just words, but grief and love for a stranger who needed it. He stands, comes around the table, and kneels beside her chair. The gesture is so unexpected, so contrary to every rule about vampire kings and human servants, that Elena's breath catches. I'm not asking you to marry me, he says quickly, seeing her expression. Not yet. We barely know each other, and I meant what I said about courting you properly. But I want you to know that this is real for me. You're not a phase or a rebellion against the court. You're someone I want beside me. Someone I'm falling for. Elena's eyes burn. She touches his face, traces the line of his jaw. I'm falling too, she admits. And it terrifies me, because I could lose you, or worse, I could disappoint you. Not possible, Theron says firmly. You've already exceeded every expectation, and I have no intention of losing you. He kisses her then, deeper than before, and Elena lets herself melt into it, lets herself believe that maybe, impossibly, this could work. A vampire king and a human widow choosing each other against every expectation and tradition. When they finally pull apart, both breathing hard, Theron rests his forehead against hers. I should get you back to your chambers. If I keep you out here much longer, I won't want to let you go. Elena laughs, the sound breathy and happy. Would that be so terrible? Yes, because I'm trying to be honorable. But his smile is wicked. Though if you keep looking at me like that, honor might become negotiable. Scandalous, Your Majesty. You have no idea. He helps her stand, keeps her hand in his as they walk back through the garden. The night is perfect, warm and filled with the scent of jasmine and roses. And Elena thinks that maybe, just maybe, she's finally found where she belongs. Not in a palace or a title, but in the steady grip of a vampire king's hand. In the way he sees her, wholly and completely. In a love that's strong enough to defy death, tradition, and every obstacle in their path. And as they walk together through the garden, as the night blooms around them and the future stretches out full of possibility, Elena Morwenna allows herself something she hasn't had in years. Hope. The crisis comes 2 weeks later, during the Grand Council meeting that Elena has been dreading since Theron first told her about it. You don't have to attend, he says that morning, his fingers threading through her hair as they sit together in his private study. They've fallen into a rhythm over the past weeks, stolen moments between his royal duties and her translation work. The council can be brutal, especially with newcomers. But Elena shakes her head. If I'm going to be part of your life, I need to face them eventually. Hiding will only make them think I'm weak. You're not weak. His voice is fierce. You're the strongest person I know. She kisses him softly, drawing courage from his certainty. Then let me prove it to them too. The council chamber is massive, all vaulted ceilings and dark wood paneling. Ancient vampires fill the seats around a circular table, each one radiating power and age. Elena recognizes some from that night in the study. Lord Ambrose, Lady Vesper, Cassandra hovering near the back like a venomous shadow. But there are others, too. Vampires she's never seen. Their eyes tracking her every movement as she enters beside Theron. He's insisted she sit next to him, at his right hand where his consort would traditionally be placed. The message is clear, and the disapproval in the room is thick enough to taste. Your Majesty, Lord Ambrose begins once everyone is seated, we appreciate you bringing your companion to this meeting. It gives us the opportunity to address some concerns directly. Concerns, Theron repeats, his voice dangerously neutral. How diplomatic. We simply want to understand your intentions, Lady Vesper says smoothly. This human has been at your side constantly for 2 weeks. The servants talk, the nobles speculate, and our allied kingdoms are beginning to ask questions about succession, about the stability of our throne. The stability of my throne is not in question, Theron says coldly. What you mean is that you're uncomfortable with my choice of companion. A vampire Elena doesn't recognize leans forward, his silver hair gleaming in the candlelight. Your Majesty, forgive my bluntness, but this woman is mortal. Even if you turn her tomorrow, she would need decades to adjust, to gain the strength and political acumen necessary to stand beside you. In the meantime, our kingdom appears weak, distracted, led by a king who's forgotten his duty in favor of infatuation. Elena's hands clench in her lap, but she keeps her face calm. This is what she expected, what she prepared for. But hearing it stated so baldly, having her presence described as a weakness, still hurts. Careful, Lord Matthias, Theron warns. You're dangerously close to insulting me. I would never, Matthias says quickly. But surely you see our position. The border disputes with the werewolf territories are escalating. The Fey courts are demanding new trade negotiations. And you've been spending your evenings translating old letters instead of preparing strategies. Those old letters, Theron says, his voice tight with controlled anger, contain 3,000 years of my grandmother's wisdom. Political strategies she employed, alliances she built, mistakes she learned from. Elena's translations have already revealed information about historical treaties that Lord Ambrose's scholars somehow missed. Information that's directly relevant to our current Fey negotiations. This causes a stir. Lord Ambrose looks affronted, while several other council members lean forward with interest. Is this true? Lady Vesper asks, looking at Elena for the first time. You've found relevant political intelligence in the Dowager Queen's journals? Elena swallows, feeling dozens of ancient eyes on her. Yes, my lady. Queen Seraphine documented extensive negotiations with the Summer Court over border access 300 years ago. The terms she secured then would actually favor us now if we invoke the original treaty. And why would the Fae honor a 300-year-old treaty? Matthias asks skeptically. Because Fae are bound by their word, Elena replies, surprised by how steady her voice sounds. Queen Seraphine was careful to have the treaty witnessed by the Autumn Court as well. Breaking it would dishonor them in front of their rivals. They'd rather renegotiate from the original terms than admit the treaty ever lapsed. The room goes silent. Elena can feel Theron's pride radiating from beside her, but she can also feel the calculation in the ancient vampire's eyes. She's just proven she's not merely decorative, that she has value beyond being Theron's romantic interest. Impressive, Lady Vesper says slowly. And you found this in the journals? In a series of letters between Queen Seraphine and her consort, Elena confirms. He was the one who actually suggested the strategy of involving the Autumn Court. The Queen valued his counsel highly. The parallel isn't subtle, and from the look on Lady Vesper's face, she catches it immediately. The great Dowager Queen Seraphine, beloved by all, took political advice from her human-turned-vampire consort, but before the mood can shift, Cassandra steps forward from her position near the wall. How convenient that these helpful documents appeared just as you needed them. Almost as if someone with knowledge of Old Corvinian could fabricate whatever translation would be most beneficial. The accusation hangs in the air like poison. Elena's stomach drops as she realizes what Cassandra is implying, that she's lying, that she's making up translations to secure her position. That's a serious charge, Theron says, his voice like ice. Are you accusing Elena of fraud? I'm simply saying that we only have her word that these translations are accurate, Cassandra replies, her tone falsely sweet. None of us can verify them. For all we know, she could be telling you whatever she thinks you want to hear. My grandmother chose to write in Old Corvinian for a reason, Theron snaps, to ensure only the right person could translate her words. Or, Lord Matthias says carefully, to ensure that whoever could translate them would have enormous leverage over you. Your Majesty, has it occurred to you that this woman might be manipulating you? Using her unique skill to make herself indispensable? Elena feels like she's been slapped. She wants to defend herself, to prove that every translation has been faithful and true. But how can she? They're right that no one else can verify her work. It's her word against their suspicions, and she's just a human widow, while they're ancient nobles with centuries of political experience. Enough! Theron's voice cracks through the chamber like thunder. He stands and the temperature drops dramatically. I will not sit here and allow you to insult Elena's integrity. She has done nothing but serve this court faithfully, and she's found information that could resolve a conflict that's been building for months. Instead of thanking her, you accuse her of manipulation? We're simply suggesting verification, Lady Vesper says, though she looks uncomfortable now. Surely there must be another scholar somewhere who knows Old Corvinian, someone who could confirm the translations are accurate. My grandmother specifically chose a nearly dead language, Theron says through clenched teeth. Finding another translator could take months, even years. And in the meantime, what? We ignore potentially crucial information? We treat Elena like a criminal based on nothing but Cassandra's vindictive speculation? If the translations are genuine, Matthias says, then there's no reason to fear verification. In fact, it would strengthen the human's position considerably to have independent confirmation. It's a trap, Elena realizes. If she agrees, they'll drag out the process, undermining her credibility for months while they search for a translator who might not even exist. If she refuses, they'll say she has something to hide. Before she can respond, the chamber doors burst open. A young vampire messenger rushes in, his face pale with fear. Your Majesty, he gasps. I apologize for the interruption, but there's an urgent situation. The werewolf Alpha's daughter has been found dead on our border. They're claiming it was a vampire attack, and the Alpha is demanding immediate justice. He's threatening war. The room erupts. Council members are shouting over each other, demanding information, discussing military readiness. But Elena's mind is racing, because she remembers something from the journals she translated just yesterday. Wait, she says, her voice too quiet to be heard over the chaos. Theron hears her, though. He turns, his expression strained. What is it? The journals, Elena says urgently, grabbing his arm. Yesterday's translation. Queen Seraphine wrote about a similar incident 200 years ago. A werewolf was killed on the border, and the vampires were blamed. But it turned out to be a third party trying to provoke a war between the two kingdoms. Who? Theron demands. Who was behind it? A rogue Fey faction that wanted to expand their territory while both sides were distracted fighting each other. Elena's heart is pounding. Queen Seraphine wrote that they used iron weapons to kill the werewolf, made it look like vampire claw marks. But iron doesn't affect vampires the same way it affects Fey. She had her investigators check the wound patterns and found traces of iron poisoning that wouldn't occur in a true vampire attack. The room has gone quiet, everyone listening now. Lord Ambrose looks skeptical, but interested. Are you suggesting this is the same scenario? I'm suggesting it's worth investigating before we rush into war, Elena says firmly. If there are iron traces, if the wound patterns match what Queen Seraphine documented, then we have evidence this is a frame job. We can present that evidence to the werewolf Alpha, show him we're being targeted just like his daughter was. Lady Vesper stares at her for a long moment. Then she says, Lord Ambrose, send your fastest investigators to the border. Have them check for exactly what the human described. Iron traces, wound patterns, anything inconsistent with a vampire attack. Agreed, Matthias says grudgingly. But in the meantime, we need to prepare for the possibility of war. If the human is wrong, if I'm wrong, you'll have lost a few hours of investigation time, Elena interrupts, surprising herself with her boldness. If I'm right, you'll have prevented a war and identified the real enemy. Seems like a worthwhile gamble. Theron's hand finds hers under the table, squeezes tight. His eyes shine with pride, and something deeper. Something that makes her heart race. Do it, he orders. Send the investigators, and someone get me a line to the werewolf Alpha. Tell him I'm personally overseeing the investigation, and I'll have answers within 24 hours. Tell him my best translator just uncovered historical evidence of similar attacks, and I believe his daughter's death is part of a larger conspiracy. The council moves into action, vampires dispersing to handle various aspects of the crisis. But before the chamber empties completely, Lady Vesper approaches Elena directly. "That was either very clever or very lucky," she says, her ancient eyes sharp and assessing. "Which was it?" Elena meets her gaze steadily. "It was me doing my job, reading the journals thoroughly, remembering details that seemed relevant." "Isn't that what you accused me of failing to do properly?" A ghost of a smile crosses Vesper's face. "Touché, young one. If your information proves accurate, if it prevents this war, you'll have done this kingdom a service no amount of political breeding could match. And if it doesn't," Elena asks quietly, "then you'll have proven nothing except that you tried." Vesper glances at Theron, who's deep in conversation with Lord Ambrose across the room. "But between you and me, I hope you're right. Not just for the kingdom's sake, but because I haven't seen the king this alive in decades. My old friend Seraphine would be pleased." She sweeps away before Elena can respond, leaving her standing alone in the massive chamber. Elena's legs feel weak, adrenaline draining now that the immediate crisis has passed. She might have just saved them. Or she might have made everything worse. There's no way to know until the investigators return. Theron appears at her side, his hand on her lower back, steadying her. "Come on," he says softly. "Let's get you somewhere private before you collapse." "I'm fine," Elena protests, but her voice shakes. "You're incredible," he corrects, guiding her out of the chamber and down a side corridor. "You just stood up to a room full of ancient vampires, got accused of fraud, and potentially stopped a war. All before lunch. I'd say you're entitled to a moment of weakness." He leads her to a small private sitting room and closes the door. The moment they're alone, Elena's composure cracks. Her hands start shaking, and she sinks onto a velvet sofa. "What if I'm wrong?" she whispers. "What if I just sent investigators on a wild chase based on a 200-year-old journal entry? What if the werewolf alpha sees it as a delay tactic and attacks anyway?" Theron kneels in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "Then we deal with it. But Elena, you gave us the best possible option. A way to verify the truth before rushing into violence. That's wisdom, not weakness. They think I'm manipulating you. They think I made up the translations to make myself valuable. Let them think whatever they want." His voice is fierce. "I know the truth. I've watched you work, seen your notes, heard you struggle with difficult passages. You're not a liar or a manipulator. You're brilliant and thorough, and exactly what this kingdom needs, even if they're too blind to see it yet." Elena looks at him. At this vampire king kneeling before her like she's the royalty. "You're willing to risk your throne for me." "I'm willing to risk everything for you," he corrects, "because my grandmother was right. Love is worth more than crowns and traditions, and the approval of ancient vampires who've forgotten what it means to feel anything beyond duty." He kisses her then, desperate and tender, and Elena kisses him back like she's drowning and he's air. When they finally break apart, she rests her forehead against his. "I love you," she whispers, the words tumbling out before she can stop them. "I know it's too soon. I know I shouldn't say it, but I love you." Theron's smile is radiant, transforming his entire face. "It's not too soon. And I love you too, Elena Morwenna. My brilliant, brave, impossible human who walked into my life and changed everything." The next 20 hours are excruciating. Elena tries to work on translations but can't concentrate. Theron is locked in meetings, preparing for both peace and war. Cassandra spreads rumors that Elena's information is fake, that the king is being led astray by infatuation. But then, just after dawn, word arrives. The investigators found exactly what Elena predicted. Iron traces in the wounds, patterns inconsistent with vampire attacks, and evidence of fey magic used to disguise the true nature of the killing. More than that, They caught the perpetrators trying to flee. Rogue Fey assassins hired by a minor noble who wanted to destabilize both kingdoms so he could seize power in the chaos. The werewolf Alpha, presented with irrefutable evidence that vampires weren't responsible, calls off his war preparations. Instead, he proposes a joint task force to hunt down the conspirators and strengthen border security between their kingdoms. The threat of war evaporates overnight, replaced by the strongest vampire-werewolf alliance in 2 centuries. And everyone knows it's because of Elena's quick thinking, because she remembered an obscure journal entry and connected the patterns. The council reconvenes that evening, but the atmosphere is completely different. When Elena enters with Theron, several vampires actually nod to her respectfully. Even Lord Matthias looks grudgingly impressed. "It appears," Lady Vesper says once everyone is seated, "that we owe you an apology, Miss Morwenna. Your translations were accurate, and your insights likely saved thousands of lives on both sides." "More than that," Lord Ambrose adds, "you've given us a framework for investigating similar incidents. Queen Seraphine's journals contain decades of political wisdom we've been unable to access. With your continued translations, we could strengthen our position with multiple kingdoms." Elena glances at Theron, who squeezes her hand under the table. This is it, the moment where she's either accepted or rejected permanently. "I never doubted Elena's integrity," Theron says, his voice carrying through the chamber. "But I'm glad the rest of you finally see what I've known from the beginning. She's brilliant, dedicated, and an asset to this kingdom. More than that, she's the woman I love and intend to make my consort, with or without this council's approval." The declaration sends ripples through the room, but no one objects. How can they after Elena just proved her value so dramatically? "If the king wishes to take a consort," Lady Vesper says slowly, "the council would not stand in his way, particularly not when that consort has already demonstrated both political acumen and dedication to the kingdom's welfare. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement, but it's acceptance. Official, public acceptance." Cassandra, standing in her usual spot near the back, looks like she's swallowed poison, but she says nothing, because there's nothing left to say. Elena has proven herself in the most undeniable way possible. The meeting continues, discussing borders and trade, and all the mundane business of running a kingdom. But Elena barely hears it, too focused on Theron's hand in hers, on the way he looks at her like she hung the stars. When the council finally adjourns, when they're alone in the corridor walking back to his private chambers, Theron pulls her into an alcove and kisses her breathless. "I'm so proud of you," he murmurs against her lips. "So incredibly proud." "I was terrified," Elena admits. "When Cassandra accused me of lying, when Matthias suggested I was manipulating you, I thought I'd lost before I'd even begun. But you didn't lose. You fought back with intelligence and evidence and courage." He cups her face in his hands. "You're going to make an extraordinary consort, Elena. Not because of your bloodline or your connections, but because of exactly who you are. A widow who used to scrub floors? A woman who sees patterns others miss. Who remembers details and makes connections. Who has the courage to speak up even when she's terrified. His smile is soft, full of love. A woman who translated a dying queen's last words, and in doing so, changed a kingdom's fate." Elena laughs, the sound watery with emotion. "When you put it that way, it sounds almost romantic." "It is romantic. We're writing our own story, you and I. One where love matters more than tradition, where worth is measured in actions rather than bloodlines." He kisses her again, slow and sweet. "One where a vampire king and a human widow prove that the best fairy tales are the ones we create ourselves." And standing there in the alcove, wrapped in Theron's arms, with their future stretching out bright and possible before them, Elena thinks about how far she's come. From invisible janitor to the king's beloved, from someone drowning in debt and grief to someone who helps prevent wars and translates ancient wisdom. She thinks about Seraphine, about a dowager queen who loved a human scholar and built a dynasty on that love. about last words written in a dead language meant for exactly the right person to find. And she realizes that she's not just translating Seraphine's story anymore, she's living her own. A story where she's not rescued from her circumstances, but instead proves that those circumstances made her exactly who she needed to be. Strong enough, brave enough, worthy enough to stand beside a king. "I love you," she tells Theron. The words easier now, natural as breathing. "I love you too," he replies. "My Elena, my translator of secrets, my impossible, wonderful human who walked into my life and showed me that my grandmother was right about everything." "About what specifically?" Elena asks, smiling against his lips. "That love is the only magic stronger than death." He pulls back enough to look at her properly, his silver eyes warm with affection and promise. That the best choice is the one that makes you happy, not the one that satisfies expectations. That when you find someone who sees you truly, you hold on to them forever. Forever, Elena thinks. For a human, that's a finite concept. But standing here with Theron, knowing that he'll turn her when she's ready, that they'll have centuries together, forever suddenly feels real. Possible. Right. Forever sounds perfect, she whispers. And when he kisses her again, she tastes the future in it. A future where she's not invisible. Where she's valued and loved and exactly where she belongs. Not because a vampire king rescued her, but because she rescued herself. And then, when she was strong enough and brave enough, she let herself be loved by someone who saw her worth from the very beginning. In the end, that's the real magic. Not crowns or immortality or ancient power, but two people choosing each other, against all odds, and building something beautiful from that choice. Love, Seraphine wrote, is the only magic stronger than death. And Elena Morwenna, former janitor and current keeper of royal secrets, finally understands exactly what the Dowager Queen meant